Indeed, you're very welcome along to OTB AM, the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball on this Friday morning. As always, Adrian with you from here and Owen with you from there. Owen, how are you getting on?
Very well, Adrian. Any crack?
Very little. Nice Friday morning. Like, you take the small things, don't you? I found that actually the capacity to better appreciate small things has been one of the things over the last 3 weeks.
100%. Whether it is delving into the various recipes of banana bread or actually appreciating what exercise does for you or actually what switching off does to you, everything is heightened. And that includes the small good things that are going on at the moment. Of course, everything being heightened works in negative ways as well. But I think you're right, actually. Yeah, there's a greater appreciation for everything. Sensitivity is higher than ever. And of course, that can help in positive little things as well.
What's the problem with banana bread?
Yeah, this is everybody's been cooking banana bread. I think Ger indulged in banana bread over the course of last weekend. I think last weekend was the weekend to do it. This weekend there may be a new trend in town.
Scones maybe or something like that, yeah.
Possibly. Like, that's the reason why all the flour has been taken from shops and stuff over the last couple of weeks. But apparently the stocks are replenishing nicely for flour. So now's your chance, Adrian, if you're looking to stock up and make some bread. Like, I was considering myself doing a bit of baking, but I'm not quite sure what to make. Like, banana bread seems like a good idea because it's sweet and it's kind of healthy as well. You don't want to be making a big cream cake if you're not going to get out and about and actually work it off. So I don't know. I think that's perhaps why people have gone for banana bread, because it's the happy medium between sweet and something that's not ridiculously unhealthy for you.
There's no reflection on my wife, who's a wonderful cook and etc. But she made banana bread, and I think that it might be easy. I think it was the main takeaway that I had because that was my main takeaway. Unless maybe not going any deeper than that. But and I made scones on. I did make scones about a week or 10 days ago. A great thing to do with the kids, by the way. They really mad keen to get involved. You want to get their hands well washed, obviously, before you get into that. And I did cheat a little bit as well, because I bought there's an Oddlums bag that you can get, which is pre-mix, so you don't have to go through all the hassle. There's still a little bit of stuff to be done, like kneading and flouring and all that sort of stuff. But they taste sweet afterwards is the only thing. When you made them yourself, they taste great.
Yeah, like any photograph, any actual evidence of these scones?
I do actually. Yeah, I will get that before we get off air today on, just because I know you're doubting me, and it's fair enough. It's fair enough. But like you said, you do need to sort of, when you're getting involved in that kind of stuff, you need to work it off. And go on.
Yeah, sorry. Just before we get into that, that's I think you might have stumbled onto a great new idea for OTB here. Perhaps hashtag GBBOTB or something like this, where we've got the great OTB bake off or something like that, and compare your scones with one another is what I say.
GIBTOTB.
Yeah, something like that. We can work on that over the course of the weekend.
So anyway, what the clunky segue I was trying to get there on was that we're obviously doing the Off the Couch series. I think people will be familiar with it. They've been watching us over the last couple of weeks, where we've had a range of different people jump on board and give us a 2, 3, sometimes a little bit more than that workout. So a bit of guidance as to what you might be able to do around your gaff with very little equipment. We've Claire Cryan coming on a little bit later on the show, who's an Irish Olympic hopeful diver, and she's got a good session going on. You will need a skipping rope for that one. But the gauntlet was laid down to me last night on. It was laid down to the both of us, actually. It should be rightly pointed out. Not all of us stepped up to the plate, but I was there for the team to do one of the workouts last night. So I chose Eric Donovan's workout of just over about a week ago, I think, or thereabouts. Because I kind of thought that, like, I'd be of that sort of boxing mentality, as you know. I'd be very much along that sort of line. I thought it'd be a workout that'd be suited to me. I was taking a little bit of footage of it as well, so we can maybe show you a little bit of what was going on in my kids' playroom last night. It was difficult. It's a good workout. I spent a lot of time looking at it, thinking, this is pretty straightforward. I'm well able for this thing. This is not something that's going to overly challenge me. It was one of the main things that I thought before doing it on, obviously, and then obviously got stuck into it. As you can see here, there's a few treats along the way. Some treats maybe before I even started. That one there, that's the skaters, as he called it. And I kind of thought, oh, that's easy. And then you do a bit of a jump every 5 times. But it's easy probably the first time. And the mountain climber here, they're not bad all of them are not bad the first time. And then they start to grind and grind and grind. And also in my head, you can see the state of me doing this stuff. In my head, I was Eric Donovan.
Yeah, yeah, you're it's clearly having pushing you. I like the way you're wearing the Mayo shorts from the Croke Park game a couple of years ago as well. I get good use out of them as well. But it's clearly having its effect. It's clearly doing the job. And like, are you doing the Eric Donovan level of rests and reps and going at the same intensity that he suggested?
Yeah, it's a good question. So his whole thing was you do his 50-20, he called it. Remember that? He was like, do 50 seconds of exercise and then you take a 20-second break and away you go. I was kind of more doing sort of 50-60 at the very least, and maybe even at times a little bit more than that. But it was a tough enough workout. Like, so you do your star jumps to begin with, you sort of ease into it, nice, fairly straightforward. You're into your press ups, as you could see there. After that, at some point, the mountain climber was the second one. The high knees was the third one. The press ups, and like, I was actually astonished that I was able to do more than 2 press ups. You could see my technique there at times. There wasn't a lot of dip going on. Into the skaters, and then the squats to round up, and like, definitely watched Eric Donovan's piece and thought, not bad. I think I could probably, if I wanted to, I could probably do that pretty handily. But he was saying it was a 7-minute workout. It was taking me 9-10 minutes to do each part of it. Yeah.
So you shave 2 minutes off that, and it becomes extremely intense at that point, I'd imagine. For somebody who's just starting out on the home workouts, let's not forget.
I mean, you say starting out in some sort of an insinuation that this is going to continue. Let's wait and see on that one. The thing that I was thinking was that, like, we have such an array of different people that have taken this thing on, that there's probably a workout there for everybody. Like, that one wasn't bad, and actually, if I was to go back, I probably will go back and do that one again, because it does. He's obviously mapped it out in a way that tests your different muscles as you work through it. I'm just not sure I'm going back.
Yeah, I was just saying in terms of what actually suits you. Like, we're both basically professional swimmers, Adrian. So, like, actually home workouts and stuff like that, it doesn't really fit with our chosen discipline, our vocation in our sporting life, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, today's Off the Couch guest is going to be Claire Crine, and on her Twitter account, she's been posting videos of her home workouts, which look complicated. I'm not going to lie, could be the next level up for people who've been following Off the Couch and getting through the videos and the lunchtime workouts pretty easily. That's been her own personal Twitter account. She may actually simplify it for the likes of you and I. I do know, as you said, that a skipping rope may be involved. I can skip, but perhaps she's going to actually ask us to do double jumps over the rope, or whatever you call that.
Yeah, it's anyway. Look, I gave it a go last night. I took him for the team. I don't know that I'm going to be seating out and Off the Couch on anytime soon, I have to say, but it was good. I did it about 9:30 last night. Probably got the heart rate up a little bit too much at a time where I should be thinking about going to bed, but a few of those ginger nuts, Peppa Pig jellies, and some of the Pringles, like, it's the ultimate thing to offset doing some exercise.
Peppa Pig jellies, any use?
Yeah, they're not bad. Yeah, those ones particularly, actually, probably not great, but there are other ones that are. I'm a bit of a connoisseur of jellies now. You'd sort of lose your way with jellies after you're a kid, until you have kids, and then suddenly you're back into it and you're like, God, what
jellies,
underrated treat. Like, overrated
in general. Yeah, like, you might be partial to a wine gum here or there, which is clearly the most superior of all the jellies that exist in the world, but generally they're terrible in comparison to chocolate and or crisps and or biscuits. And, like, in terms of the junk food hierarchy, jellies are at the very, very bottom, no question about it.
That's unfortunately the incorrect answer on. It's the wine gums, okay. Natural jellies, have you had them?
Sorry, yes, they would be number one. They're the natural confectionery company, not national confectionery company. But if we were to nationalize one company, I'm sure confectionery people would probably pick them. Yeah, actually, that'd be true. But
they're
still,
delicious.
In general, they're the best of a bad bunch.
Wow, God, scathing on jellies, Owen Shane. What a hot take to kick off Friday's OTB AM. We do want to hear from you if you're out and about today, wherever it is, or if you're at home, which is where you should be. We do want to hear from you this morning. 087 918 180 if you want to get in contact with us between now and about 9:30. We have a stack show, as you might imagine. And also, we're up on Twitter. If you've taken on any of our Off the Couch challenges, by the way, and you haven't had to embarrass yourself like I have by having to record it, please do get in contact with us, because we'd love to hear from you if you've taken that on and it's been some use, or you have any recommendations for others. Please do send those through to us. Right, it's 7:40 on this Friday morning. A very good morning to you. Adrian and Owen with you. A little bit of a flavour of what's happening in the world of sport this morning. Golf to begin with. And the former European Ryder Cup captain Paul McGinley says that this year's competition will happen behind closed doors, is his take on that. Padraig Harrington due to lead Europe, of course, into battle against America at Whistling Straits in September. The Masters and the USPGA have both been postponed until later in the year. The Open likely to follow suit. But McGinley was in conversation with Golf Weekly here yesterday, and he said that even if sport can resume later in the year, travel restrictions obviously are likely to mean that it does so with no fans present. So that's from the golf. In football, leagues across Europe have been formally asked not to abandon their seasons as a result of the coronavirus shutdown. That's the recommendation coming there. Belgian Pro League chiefs will ask a General Assembly this month to end their season prematurely, with current leaders Bruges declared the champions. But a joint letter from UEFA, the European Club Association, and the European Leagues body saying that they're formulating a plan to see the seasons completed. So what that will look like in terms of each league, obviously, we shall see the PFA, the Professional Footballers Association in England, saying that it fully accepts that players will have to be flexible meanwhile and share the financial burden of the coronavirus outbreak. They're certainly saying that. Their actions have gone slightly counter to that so far. We'll give you more detail on that in just a few minutes. And finally, in the World Gaelic Games, the former Armagh footballer Marion McGuinness says that she's recovering from COVID-19. The 2012 Intermediate All-Ireland winner contracted the virus last week while working at Cavan General Hospital. She says her initial symptoms saw her feel sick and insanely tired. The 34-year-old was due to be on physio duties for this weekend's cancelled ladies football all-star trip, but says that she's only 70 to 80% recovered. So we wish Marion the very best with that. So it's 7:42 on this Friday morning. We've lots coming your way over the next little while. We will tell you about what's coming up on the show this morning. We have the sports page in just a couple of moments' time. Lockdown lowdown that's been coming your way every day over the last 2 or 3 weeks, just about 8 o'clock or thereabouts. Sunderland Till I Die. I don't know if you've been following the latest documentary from Netflix. It's season 2, of course, of following the trials and tribulations of Sunderland AFC. That's coming your way at about 8:15. Myself and Owen and Kieran Bradley as well. And then after that, Alan Quinlan's going to join us live on the line, where we've plenty to get into. Eddie Jones signed a new contract, and there's some interesting stuff. We need more Eddie Jones in our lives, I think, is the short story there. Interesting stuff to say from him. Johnny Sexton obviously confirming that his captaincy initial agreement anyway was for just 1 year on the show yesterday. Get Quinny's thoughts on that. And also he selected his World 15. So we're putting it through the rigour to see exactly, to get him to explain his selections there. Off the couch with Claire Cryan, that's coming your way at 10 to 9. And we've a crappy quiz coming your way just after 9 o'clock. So that's a bit of a sense of what's happening there. But right now, time for the sports page.
OTB AM.
Right, we're going to start with offtheball.com for you this morning, where John Giles, there's plenty up there, but including John Giles on the show with Nathan last night, as he is every Thursday, selecting his Manchester United all-time 11. I don't know if you were following any of this on, but an interesting selection, as it was always going to be. The midfield area, obviously one of the most hotly contested, as you might have imagined. It's probably better to some of the players who haven't made John Giles' cut. Ryan Giggs, Steve Bruce, Gary Pallister, Brian Robson, Wayne Rooney, I think, was one of the ones, him and Robson, that he really agonised over. And Ruud van Nistelrooy, all of them left out of John Giles' all-time. Well, not all-time quite. It was like since 1965, I think, was the parameters that he put on it, his all-time 11. Like a thankless task.
Yeah, well, like John Giles is the one man who could put parameters on something like since 1965. We often do that. It's like, oh, we've got to pick the best players since the 60s. So we haven't a clue about the first 20, 30 years of it. Realistically, like we can watch as much video back, but Giles would be able to give us a very, very accurate representation of the actual best 11. So you'd almost take his selections as gospel. I would throw Rio Ferdinand in there as players that are absent and are conspicuous by their absence, but then again, I'd always have rated Vidic. It was Vidic and Stam he went for, right?
Yes, yeah, and I think that was actually one of the more contentious ones, that maybe because you got two hard men in there, maybe there was room for somebody who was a little bit better on the ball. Maybe Ferdinand ticks that box.
Yeah, maybe. But I think outside of that, like, great to see Dennis Irwin make it. Roy Keane is always going to make it, and Bobby Charlton, Dennis Law. Like, it's hard to, when you look at Law's statistics, when you look at Charlton's statistics, it's hard to argue against them. When you hear about Giles then wax lyrical about them, it's even harder to ignore them. And like, I think he's probably got his closest spot on with this team. And I would just love to see more of these from John Giles, more of his greatest team since 1965. And so what is it? It's Law and Best up front. With Charlton behind him, Keane.
You're putting me on the spot here now. Let me grab it here. Yeah, Keane is definitely in there.
I've got it up here. So Best in Law up front. Oh, Ronaldo, of course. Sorry, on one flank. Paul Scholes, Bobby Charlton, Roy Keane, Tony Dunn. Tony Dunn is the one now. In fairness, like in a left back. So that's the one person that, like, a lot of us, when we go back, we can't actually say, yeah, oh, great player, Tony Dunn, whereas a lot of people will be like, yeah, Jaap Stam, Vidic 100% deserve to make it. And then Dennis Irwin takes the other full-back spot with Schmeichel and goals. So it's a team that crosses all the ages, really. And, like, I think, I was listening to Billy Giles last night, he was saying that his opinion on Ronaldo definitely went on a journey through the years. I think that was definitely the case with the television panel at the time, that Ronaldo wasn't exactly, he didn't get highly rated at the time, maybe because of a perceived work ethic, but actually what that work ethic was, it was certainly there. It was just an attitude towards him trying to do it all himself quite often. And once we realized that this guy was actually one of the greatest players of all time, perhaps the greatest player of all time when it comes to pure statistical output, then there's no way you can't include him in your team.
Yeah, there was all that sort of flash and flare as well that may not have gone down particularly well with John and his cohorts as well. So yeah, the Ronaldo selection, because he's gone on to have such an amazing career elsewhere, obviously afterwards, was, I don't know, contentious is probably overstating it, but certainly creating debate, as it has done plenty of online. So more, as you say, Owen, more of that hopefully to come from John over the next while. In the newspapers, the Irish Independent kicked things off. Lovely photograph here of Keith Earls and his kids. He's on a bit of a fundraising drive. Really another great icon, I would go as far as to say, of Irish sport. He's certainly turning into it. Keith Earls, leading by example, helping to fundraise for Bernardo's, he's auctioning his jersey from the Ireland win over New Zealand in Dublin in 2018. So there's a GoFundMe page there that you can go and check out on Keith's Twitter feed. I'm sure there's other social handles as well. Sam Wallace writes about the Premier League stars snubbing plea to make wage sacrifice. This is one that dominates a lot of the back pages today, as you well might have imagined. They've been a bit watery, it has to be said, in terms of their appetite to take any kind of a pay cut, and Sam Wallace has that story there. And David Kelly takes up that story from OTB AM yesterday, that Johnny Sexton revealing that his captaincy was agreed as a one-season thing, speculation in the end of then that James Ryan could come in as early as November, and everybody's talking about him as the anointed one, obviously. But I mean, it could just as easily be that Johnny Sexton and Andy Farrell have had that agreement for 1 year on, and that it's been left loose by design. Makes total sense to me that Andy Farrell knew he was somebody that he could rely on. He knew that he was largely going to be somebody who was going to be in the team, has all the attributes of a captain, and like, we'll try this for a year and see how it goes. And like, if it works out, we might go another year, and who knows where Johnny Sexton will be after that year. But for the minute, I mean, I don't know that anointing James Ryan as the one that's definitely going to come in 3 months or whenever the season starts again. I'm not sure that's exactly right. Sexton could go on and do this for another 18 months potentially, or more.
Also, the suggestion as well that James Ryan is automatically second choice and is automatically vice captain to Johnny Sexton. I know he is a vice captain, and he would certainly be in the mix for the role where Johnny Sexton to not be captain in a year's time. But there are other contenders in the mix. Certainly, you'd have Henshaw Ringrose. You'd have potentially Tyke Furlong. Like, there are other options outside it. Like, James Ryan is. It's so easy to say that he's going to become the next captain because he's got captaincy material all over him. And I think he just kind of echoes the likes of Paul O'Connell in what he can bring to the table from a leadership perspective, in terms of hearing him talk, in terms of like hearing the way his attitude on the pitch and how quickly he just seems like a mainstay of every team he's played in, and they've all been excellent teams. And then obviously he's just an unbelievable player, world class, and like, he is the outstanding candidate, the outstanding young candidate. But I just don't think it's as clear cut that if Sexton doesn't get it, James Ryan automatically steps up. That being said, if I was picking it, I would certainly give it to James Ryan, and almost would have been persuaded to give it to him this year. I've got the Irish Examiner this morning.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, go for it.
The Irish Examiner leads with the rugby as well. Keatley happy to kick on in Italy, writes Simon Lewis. So Ian Keatley chatting to the media across the newspapers this morning. Thankfully, from his perspective, he got the opportunity to go home to Ireland during the last round of the Guinness Pro 14, or one of the last rounds of the Guinness Pro 14, which means he's not stuck in Italy as everything is breaking out, and did break out there. Thankfully, of course, it seems, and I say it seems, the figures have started to plateau in Italy at the moment, and he says that he's happy to kick on there, as the headline suggests, to go back there for next season, or if this season finds some sort of safe room to conclude. For one autumn, knockout hurling could be glorious, is the other headline there in the Irish Examiner. That's Anthony Daly talking about an old-fashioned knockout competition to decide the destination of Liam McCarthy this autumn. Jones wants an England that plays perfect game. That's Eddie Jones talking about his new contract. And some players have played their last game. This is in relation to rugby as well. So this is Isa Nasewa, Brendan O'Brien writing about him, and logging into his Facebook account earlier this week and shared a rare but heartfelt post. It was addressed to all the rugby community and asked that players everywhere spare a thought for your teammates and brothers who will retire at the end of the season and may in fact play their last game of professional rugby. It's a good point. Those people who are kind of seeing the clock tick away on their career and may not be able to get back onto the pitch again. Unfortunately, it's a situation where players may have played their last game or may struggle to get a contract again. In some sports, rugby might be one of these. We just don't know how the sport is going to be financially hit in the long term.
Yeah, I love that. For one autumn only, knockout hurling could be glorious. By the way, it's absolutely spot on. Like, in the uncertainty of everything that's going to go on, I'm sure there'll be limited games, and the idea of just going back to like that sort of one-off game where probably teams and players aren't going to be at their full peak of match fitness anyway until you get very, very deep into the championship. I think, bring it on. I mean, I'm probably saying that in the context of just bring any sport on, obviously, at some point when it's safe to do so. But yeah, geez, the idea of knockout hurling really appeals. The Irish Times, David Conn and Paul McKenna is here. Premier League players may be willing to pay wages of club staff, says the PFA in England. Players, it seems here on this, we might as well get into this story here because it is in a lot of the newspapers here this morning. Like, effectively what's happening is players here are trying to get out of town with the least possible bruises, right? The idea of paying club staff is just so totally bizarre to me. Like, it's nothing to do with them. If they're offering that forward as some sort of a fig leaf for, well, look at us taking a bit of a hit here to pay what, let's face it, compared to the wages that they're on, will be a paltry sum. And if they're willing to do that, then just take the pay cut, I would say. It's a very complicated thing in that I think we're all trying to reach for some conclusion that fits all, and there isn't one, because even in the Premier League, the state of the finances of clubs, you might have a Manchester City who are well able to continue to pay their players, possibly over the duration of it, and not have to furlough them or furlough any of them. Any of their staff, and then you'll have other clubs that will not be a realistic ambition for them. But I really do think the idea of them paying the regular club staff is ludicrous. It's not their position. It's nothing to do with them.
So your point is that the players shouldn't be doing this.
It's absolutely that if they want to take a cut, then do that and let the club sort it. But it's ludicrous to suggest that the players will be paying club staff. Yeah,
that direct sort of train of thought probably will be a bit of a strange one, all right. But like, I don't know. There seems to be, like, who was it yesterday? Dominic Raab coming out and criticising the Premier League footballers for not taking the pay cut, and like Jonathan Walters had a thread up yesterday, which I think reflects what a few people would have been thinking. Like, nobody will have any sympathy for Premier League players if they have their wages cut. I think that needs to be put out there straight away. They are extravagantly paid. A lot of them are overpaid. Nobody is going to have any issue with that, especially in the context of a lot of people who are watching this morning, listening this morning, who may have lost their jobs, who may have had pay cuts, but particularly those who've lost their jobs. There won't be a whole pile of sympathy there. But the logic that you've got government officials coming out saying the Premier League need to come out and cut players' wages, like, why is this such a dominant part of the agenda for the government? How will they benefit from the cut in the wages here, like where will the money actually go towards funneling money into the NHS? Is there going to be a restriction placed on wage cuts that actually the money that the clubs claw back perhaps goes directly towards tax? Like that would be something that we might be interested in, to see that this could actually be done for the wider benefit of the United Kingdom here and their health service, for example, or frontline workers in general. That it's a situation where if you cut players' wages, it goes back into the club. What is the club then going to do with that? Well, do they just pocket the money and just make sure that their turnover is still the same as it was as last year? Now, one positive step they could take is certainly pay their off-pitch staff a better wage if they have had their wages cut, and they could perhaps maintain their full wages while the players take a bit of a wage cut but still get extravagantly paid. Like is it slightly populist to be standing on a pulpit and saying cut the Premier League players' wages? Because of course in the regular world we're used to living in, of course they're overpaid. But is that the actual solution to an issue out here? I'm not sure it is. I'd just be keen to see if there is some system, some way of working this, that if you are going to dock and take money from Premier League players, that it leads to some positive for someone somewhere, and it doesn't just increase the coffers of, say, an already multi-billionaire owner of a Premier League club.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think that there's a massive aspect of this that's a PR battle, and we had Matt Hancock, who's the British Health Secretary, coming out and demanding that Premier League players do their bit. Like that's
it was Hancock, not Rab. My apologies.
Yeah, but it's just look at it. It's nonsense. Like, and the idea of a Conservative government, if it was anybody apart from the football industry, they obviously have a very long track record of supporting wealthy people in the UK. As opposed to the working class. And I don't mean business people, I mean wealthy people by whatever means. And so, yeah, slightly at odds with sort of a long track record of from the Conservatives, it has to be said. But I do suspect if it was anything other than the football industry, they'd be keeping stum. But yeah, maybe some of it does go back into tax, and maybe that's fair enough. But it has to be taken on a club by club basis. The PFA, I know last week, had come out and said they wanted to look at the finances of clubs to see exactly what's going on here. I think there's an element of that's fine, that actually they do need to pick through how capable clubs are of paying wage bills. But I think that whatever rule is brought in, if clubs are going to furlough staff, then they have to furlough staff. That's the way it works. You can't say there's one rule for the players over here and another rule for general club staff. It just doesn't work. You mentioned John Walters he some interesting things to say on the debate yesterday. He says, what contributes more to the government, the NHS and the police, etc.? A Premier League player taking a pay cut that stays with the club's owners, are paying more than 45% tax through PAYE on a large salary which goes directly to the government, he asks. Let's take a look at the average Premier League player. So it goes into some of the maths. About $3 million a year, 1.4 million goes directly to tax, and then he obviously applies all the cuts, and you're left with a very small sum that ends up going back in tax to the government. He says, how about the government asks certain people who own airlines and worth billions to start paying tax, or the sports people who are tax exiles? Now, what about the bankers? The majority of players I know give a lot of money to charities and help communities. He said, sit back and take a look at exactly how much is contributed to the government and economy through their wages and taxes. Everyone has an opinion on what they should earn, but don't forget what they contribute. Look, there's an element of that's fine, but that's probably more of a point for, when the economy is fine and everything is trucking along as it should do, and we don't have the uncertainty that we have at the minute. But obviously there are clubs that are facing absolute financial ruin by this. And I'm sure that there are those in the Premier League that are in the same boat. So I don't know that the players just sitting tight and saying, well, look, we'll just continue to take the same wages we've always gotten because we're paying a large chunk of it on tax, is really going to get this done.
Well, listen, if a club is in trouble, Adrian, it's pretty simple. You dock your players' wages because they're the biggest earners at the club. My point is that there's, when you think of the extravagantly paid Premier League players, a lot of them are at clubs that are going to be okay because they have enough cash at the very top. So that's what I'm focusing on. Like, of course, when you look at potentially some of the bottom clubs in the Premier League, like say, like if you look at Brighton, for example, and you look at wage cuts there, and you look at Eddie Howe at Bournemouth taking a wage cut there, they are clubs that obviously work more off their turnover and trying to keep the head above water and trying to just be able to compete with the top 12, 15 clubs in the Premier League. Of course, in that case, you would then have to look at the players. And certainly in the Championship, you'd have to look at docking wages from the players, because everybody needs to row in behind a business that is very, very mortal at this time. And a Championship club is mortal at the moment. Like the clubs will sink. And if you go down the divisions in the England, there's even more of a nature about them that could go down as well and could hit the rocks big time. So it's a contradiction. Like you'd always like to see the biggest earners have to take a bit of a hit, but as it turns out, the biggest earners are at the most invincible clubs. So I don't know what the solution is there.
No, and anyway, the last point on it for me is they're losing the PR battle big time. Like, they really need to consider that. I think that in a way that who knows what happens with Cheltenham, right, for the years ahead, in that there are consequences to be had from that we haven't even imagined, I'm assuming, yet. But certainly in terms of an ongoing concern for that, or for maybe Premier League players are slightly less worried about it, that everybody forgets about it a week later, I'm not sure. But they are at the minute, I think, losing that PR battle big time. Just a couple of other bits on the football from the Irish Times this morning. Health official says decision to hold Liverpool Atletico game was wrong. This is David Kahn making the point that it's not hindsight, that everyone knew at the time and public health officials in Liverpool are now worried about the number of coronavirus cases in the city. Malachy Clerkin writes, whole new ball game. Sport will be last duck in the row in return to normal. This is something we've touched on over the last couple of weeks, that he says for the people involved in running sport and managing its return, the one advantage they have is the inherent time lag. Sport was the first thing to go, not because it was expandable, but because it provided a rapid way of changing the thinking and habits of a massed chunk of humanity. The corollary will be true of its return. That's that thing that we've been speaking about over the last couple of weeks of it'll trickle back. It ain't coming back in one big cliff edge.
No, that's for sure. It's something I think Malachy is articulating what a lot of people have been thinking over the last couple of days. It's not going to be something that we'll have a return to normality for quite some time. And like normality and normal have become these words that seem so unbelievably out of reach at the moment. They seem like it seems like hyperbole to use the word normal at the moment, because it seems like such an alien concept. But sport and normal, like, it could be next year, like before you actually have grounds that you can pack with people. Now the difference is we could go halfway towards that, and perhaps games behind closed doors, and like it'll be Premier League, it'll be NBA, perhaps. As you say, that trickle, and it'll be international sport, and hopefully then we'll actually have situations where we can pack League of Ireland and GAA grounds again within 12 months. But who knows what the situation is going to be. The Mirror this morning, Adrian, the Irish Mirror, scrap it is the headline. This is Kevin De Bruyne pleading for end to season to save players from injury. This has been something obviously that has kind of got brushed under the carpet a small bit, hasn't really been spoken about really. Is that, like, are you going to have a situation where if you follow through with this proposed plan by some people in the Premier League to actually play a summer league, then you're just rolling straight into another season, and the players' bodies are going to be under severe strain going into a season that is right before a European Championship. So that perhaps needs to be taken into account a little bit as well, especially because Euro 2021 is going to happen. There is definitely going to be a summer tournament next year. Shane's Open defence at risk. Meanwhile, the Open, another summer threat, another summer event under threat after the RNA admitted that the 2020 championship at Royal Sandwich could be postponed. So he could hold on to the claret jug for 2 years potentially. And Klopp tells stress heads, don't worry, be healthy, do your bits, club, as they're told. That's Gordon Taylor quoted there on the back of the Mirror. And Treviso aces on staying safe in 2 places.
Yeah, Gordon Taylor also in the Irish Daily Mail this morning defined PFA chief, no pay cuts for my stars, he says, in a line that will go down as something he's definitely have to go back on at some point. You would imagine talks with the Premier League, the EFL and the League Managers Association as well. No resolution other than the PFA saying, not on your Nelly are we taking a pay cut here. And Taylor, as you might imagine, really failing to read the room, it has to be said at this point, in a move that may well end up biting him and the PFA and the players in general in the ass at some point in the coming weeks. Kevin De Bruyne says, call off the season now. Hardly breaking exclusive news there. And Philip Lanigan, just an interesting one from an Irish point of view. The CPA chief, Michael Brody, is behind the idea of easing back with club games rather than county. It's an interesting proposition. The only slight thing in it for me is that obviously in terms of the level of seamlessness of bringing back sport, clubs will be in a far less they'll be far less positioned, I suppose, than counties even, to be able to bring back whatever measures it is that'll be put in place. Like there might be testing at grounds or social distancing, whatever it is. It'll be a bit more ad hoc, I suppose, to put it mildly, at a club game than it would even be at a county game.
And even the idea that less people will be at a club game, therefore it'll be easier to practice social distancing. Maybe that's true, but a lot of planning needs to go into place for that. If you're just letting people in because there's going to be smaller capacities, like you're going to have people standing beside each other regardless. Like it doesn't matter if you've got 100 or 1,000 or 10,000. People will gather in clusters. The back page of the Irish Sun is play cut, so pay cut, MPs, tax threat on obscene wages, but PFA and Stars still dragging feet. If there is some sort of tax threat, and if the UK are actually going to claw back some of the money from the extravagantly paid Premier League players, and you think fair enough, because that money you suspect is going to go towards vital services at the moment, and everybody could get behind that. And a 10 Son hero set for military service, so Young-min Son is going to go back to South Korea and actually fulfill his military service that he needs to do. So he's going to be stationed on Jeju Island, it seems, for the next few weeks, and that has basically just doing it at the right time when he doesn't have any football to focus on. So he's going to go home and actually carry that out.
I've been jumping around the order here, so sorry about that. But the Irish Daily Star, excuse me, forget about the title. Excuse me, Jurgen Klopp tells Liverpool stars to focus on their families. He says it's more sense, again, from the Liverpool manager, and he may well be doing loads of different things behind the scenes to get the season back, but fair play to him, making all the right noises there. Eamon Zayed is using the break to learn guitar from Daddy O'Reilly. It's one of the biggest stories across the entire newspaper industry this morning. Paul Lennon, meanwhile, wonders about how, or if at all, the Irish club is going to get back into Europe this season, given all the delays. And Jeremy Cross writes about another meeting of the Premier League today, and as you might imagine, player wage bills again, top of the bill there.
The London Times this morning leads with quotes from Eddie Jones saying, "I had to know I was still up to the job." He says that he delayed agreeing the contract extension with the RFU that was finally announced yesterday because he was not convinced that he was up to the job. He's got Simona Halep there pictured at Wimbledon last year. "I'll be champion for 2 years." Hopefully we'll have a situation where if that's the Shane Lowry interview that needs to be done if the Open gets called off as well. "I'll be champion for 2 years." Son heads for Korean Navy, as already mentioned. He's enlisted with the South Korean Navy this month. And players may go on furlough. A number of championship clubs are considering placing their players on furlough amid concerns that they could soon be struggling to pay their wage bills. That is the real threat facing championship clubs. I presume even the bottom clubs in the Premier League shouldn't have to go that far to actually be forced to do it, but they may need to do it anyway, just to for tax reasons or whatever the UK are planning on doing over the next couple of days.
I'm going to skip ahead here to The Guardian. "I can see us taking rugby to another level," says the ever modest Eddie Jones. I said at the top, we need more Eddie Jones in our lives at the minute. So like a daily interview, I could get right behind that. He's obviously signed a new contract for RFU. A podcast. He should throw that up on Twitter, see if there's much of an appetite for it.
Absolutely, put up a poll, Eddie.
Absolutely unprecedented. Meanwhile, writes Sean Ingle here, the Olympic sports fear financial ruin because of pandemic, and we don't really know the true cost of this, of course. Some of the impact of it, I'm sure, will be in ways that we can't even imagine at the minute, but it'll play out, no doubt, over the coming weeks and months.
The Irish news then, finally, for me, McNaughton. "COVID-19 will make us all appreciate the simple aspects of life." This is Terence McNaughton, who plans on deleting a number of WhatsApp groups from his mobile phone over the coming days and wants people to stop posting their good deeds on Facebook.